Okay, so now we have joined into not just the Trinity, but we are going into the fourfold. And the reason why I'm being pushed that way is probably because of some of the, we talk about the original symbols of each cycle. There are many different symbols of harmony and how that is supposed to be unfolded. But yesterday, technically, when we talk about the white hats and the black hats, because that's where we're going, we have the Maltesian from Malta cross, which you know from the Round Table races, right? The Knights of the Templar. Even though they made it in a red depiction, but that's kind of, that goes with, again, we are now going into some completely other layers, but we have kind of, in many ways, I have worked my way, sorry about all this explaining, I'm trying to finding out where this way, I say kind of, I'm trying to search the pattern, figure, okay, what am I to reveal here and what I'm to say here. What I am working with here is a symbol, and it is the Maltesian cross, which you know, the cross with the four wings, but it is not with these weird ends as you see it on the Knights of Templar dress, the red cross on the white cloak, or whatever you want to call it. But it is, again, sorry, my mind spins off. You know the saying, cloak and dagger, right? We are going in that direction, people. So going back to summer, because it also ties into Jerusalem, it ties into some of the things that were taken from Jerusalem and all of these old stories that we know of. But here I want to combine it with one of the older understandings of the swastika that was supposed to be inserted in the middle of that cross, because that is that's the solar cross. And this goes further back than that. And that's again where you say, well, Jesus was the true God, Son of God, and therefore, again, going with the Egyptian lineages that saw the sun as that's Ra, and that's the solar god, and all of these kind of things, and that's the true humans of this reality, and all of these kind of things. Whereas the humanoids had a different symbols that they were running with, the fleur de lis, the flower of life. I don't want to go down that lane, but I'm being pushed there eventually for reasons and purpose, because it also comes to the respect of life. And when we talk religious wars, and when the white hats and the black hats are fighting each other, and we are having this replays of when we're talking about forgiveness, and we're talking about the constant warring between the black hats and the white hats, or the fleurs of life, the fleur de lis, or the original Knights Templar of the Round Tables. And I am so sorry I'm diving into that, but apparently this is also part of some of the things that goes with the whole understanding of forgiveness, and some of the things that were attempted to be done when we met up in the angelic wars that happened in the Middle Ages, that were happening on the middle domain, whereas on the physical level, we were having the Knights Templar wars going on there. So there is always a deeper level to everything. I don't want to go further into that one. Just want to put here with the forgiveness, and how some of the old groups of humanoids and some of the old groups of humans have been battling each other for a very, very long time. And that should also be taken into consideration when we talk about the respect of life. And some of the things that some of us began doing after the timeline event, where we could say our original configuration got a little bit twisted and distorted. And with that, some of the original standpoints we had when we divided and we began the project of figuring out if we could use the humanoid type of life force and configurations and what have you as an actual feature that was supposed to happen as part of the laws, or it was something that has been done by our own choices, and with that were technically unlawful, and due to wrongful use of energy and consciousness had then created that. And if that was so, then it was a failure. So now you're beginning to see some of the deeper implications of what is the rightful use of energy, because if the humanoids are part of the divine plan, let us put it that way, the universal cycles, and were supposed to divide to create a higher level of opposition, that's the arguments, then they are not a failure, but a new branch of consciousness and energy, and should be allowed to exist. And then you have the original branch that will still be the the tree itself, and the humanoids would just be a branch. But the humanoids eventually came to the being that they could create a tree of life themselves, and by that be just as strong a tree, and not just a branch, but actually, and not just a fruit, but something that were even bigger than that, and were part of a much larger scheme of new universal cycles. And I still haven't got any answer for that one, because as I said, that was completely blocked by the timeline event. But then you begin to see, if we have that foundation, is it or is it not? Is it true or is it not true? Is it part of life or is it not part of life? Then you can see what will happen if you get twisted, if you get distorted, and you are a humanoid and you get distorted. Then you can suddenly see how that can twist into some of the mentality that we are seeing expressed in the humanoids. And if you're a true human and you originally were on that position that you didn't really know, but you had to investigate it further and had to see it play out, and at the same time you were deeply embedded in your original ways of existing, well, you could see how that would go if that got distorted a little bit. And I'm here giving, so when we talk about the forgiveness as a respect of life, sorry about that, as a respect of life, these are some of the things that we need to come to terms with. So in that way, is it really forgiveness when we talk about the highest layers where we never got to play out the effects of it? Does the true humans and true humanoids and the original races, do they operate with the understanding of forgiveness? No, because there it's all determined by outcomes and laws and principles, and wrongful use of energy eventually would show out, as the elders said. If the humanoids are meant to be, they will grow prosperous and they will become a new line of existence that will prove its own right by its own discord and by its own choices, and by that will prove itself to either be worthy or not worthy of the continuation, which is clear. So that was the stand from the councils. And that was from that level that we worked when we did the whole, let's keep the door open. For those of you who want to divide, you do that. For those of you who want to return, we keep the door open. That was the Pillar Project. So that's part of the original engineering. And then you had the timeline event. So when we talk about forgiveness, that is where we need to unify in the consequences of the timeline event and understand the consequences of the timeline event and ramifications it had on us. And there together unify in teams again, trying to fix it. Not because we want to avoid the devastation cycle, because that's part of the laws and that is what it is. But for those who want to return, that should be fixed. For those who want to elevate, that should be fixed. You don't have to return to become part of the true human races. You can return to the original humanoid worlds that is also under the solar reaches, as I keep saying. So that's all of what we were before the timeline event. So that's the goal here. That is to, when we talk about forgiveness and those of us who team up, if we are having a person that is deeply embedded into the structure of the third cycle or the dark ones, there's nothing we can do there. Because they will always self-justify. They will do the selfish processes. They know it's wrong, but they will not take these emotions of this is wrong or I shouldn't do that because I know it will lead to ramification. No, they will explore that further because that's what they began with the timeline event energies. That's what led them to who they are today. They already had that configuration due to the timeline event. And they said, well, I am in this state now, so I might as well just explore it, and then time will tell if I was right or wrong. And eventually they got so inverted and so distorted that they lost all track of what's right and what's wrong, and they have now become what they are. And they can't be reasoned with. They are so lodged into that perception. There are only few of them, because they have at some point in time decided to become part of humanity. It has rubbed off, and by that at some point might choose to leave. As you just heard about the cat, they can be in cats and all sorts of creatures, blackbirds and what have you in our reality. They're not interested in leaving. They're here. They feel it's part of their teaching process of humanity to teach us the dark lessons so that they have a purpose and a function as well. And as long as they feel it that way, instead of saying, well, I have the purpose and the function of clearing out the severe consequences of the timeline event and do what is right to try and assist the others that have that as well for the highest good of the many, but seeing it as a selfish purpose as being the hardcore teachers of humanity, there's not much we can do in that perspective. So just for those of you who have this tendency to want to look into the darkness, you probably have some of these inverted genetics that wants you to explore this. But just know that's a very, very dangerous path. That's what led to the fall of Atlantis. That has led to fall of civilizations. That has led to all levels of destruction that exist that were untimely and uncalled for. Because destruction of life force should only happen due to severe failure, not because you investigate something you technically know is wrong. So don't do what you know is wrong because it leads to paths you don't want to get access to. Because of the timeline event, there are severe consequences when we begin to truly work with life and truly work with energy. Then it's not just because it's fun or interesting. That's why some of you have butted head with me, because that's where, when I can see that some of you are getting close to that one, then you will get the warrior in me, and I'll take my flame sword and I'll plunge it into the ground, and I will emit as much light as I can to get away all of that darkness, and you will hear me say so. And some of you that are embedded into that darkness, you will then turn away and say, no, it's my prerogative to investigate this. You are not to tell me what's right and what's wrong. And then I'll just say, well, fine, you do what you feel is right for you. But I don't feel this is right for me, and therefore we will segregate and separate completely. So that is our prerogative, that when we are in facing great darkness, we are allowed to turn the other cheek and walk away and say, I will not engage in that because I know what the consequences are. And you have now decided to go on a path that I will no longer follow. We are entitled to do that. And then we should just let it go. That's also part of the forgiveness. It's not as in kind of, oh yeah, I completely understand why you have to do that. Well, we technically do, but we don't feel compassion because then we connect ties. You see, compassion has this level to it. The moment you feel compassion, you activate your heart field, and then you tie energy to whomever and whatever you want to forgive. So you should be very careful with that. So therefore, it should only be done with a human that is worthy of your forgiveness. Not just about throwing forgiveness here and there because you're a compassionate being. That ties you, that entangles you to things you don't want to be connected to. No, with things that do not want your forgiveness and it is not interested in working alongside to undo the wrongs that were done, to clear out and get back online, whether it's humanoid or it's true human, it doesn't really matter, but get back on track to work for the highest good of the many, or for the greater good, or for whatever we want to call it, that will lead to the fulfillment of the humanoid's destiny, or the fulfillment of the true human's destiny, and everything that we are all working for in different forms of teams, whatever that may be, because we have many different functions and many different purposes, and there are many different realms, right? So we can't say it's this or that. There are many different versions of everything. But if we are up against one that has got so regressed or so infected or so inverted that there is really nothing we can say or do or anything, these we turn the other cheek. That's also a form of forgiveness, but it's not a forgiveness that leads to a continued path together. Turning the other cheek, turn your back, move away, pull yourself out of the equation, connect all energetic cords, leave behind. That is a type of sacrifice. You leave behind because you're no longer working in cohesion towards the same goal. You are so divided that you must physically divide as well. But when we talk about the ones that we do the compassionate forgiveness for in kindness, that is where there is light reflected back. That is where there is interest in learning, interest in turning around, interest in doing the right thing. Again, becoming honorable and becoming either human or humanoid that will work under the original laws of either the humanoid system or the true human system. So this is where you can truly put in forgiveness. That will again go with saying, yeah, we are all flawed. This goes with, why do you see the great lodge of wood in your brother's eyes, but you're not, or the splinter in your brother's eyes, but you're not seeing the fucking tree in your own eyes, right? Or who is pure enough to throw the first stone? These are some of, again, gospel parables that have been put there to put this. Those who are pure enough to truly be the judge of others are allowed to throw the first stone. But since none of us are, then none of us can throw a stone. None of us can judge each other. But we can look at each other with kindness, and we can look at each other with understanding and inclusivity, where we understand the purpose of function and who and what we are, and we understand where we strayed. We have all strayed. We are all on the wrong path. And that's what's going in. We all original sinners, right? But not because we were thrown out of the Garden of Eden, but because of the timeline event and the choices that we did there. Instead of just getting all of ourselves back on track, someone divided further and began to explore that. And that's where things began to go completely wrong. And that's where I got exiled, because my stand was, and I'll stand on that one, that will not change ever. We should at that point have recalibrated completely to the highest level of our universal structures, also because of the costs. And you see now why I work as a releaser, because that's my stand there. That's what I took. And that has now been symbolically represented into this form as being a releaser. Yeah, originally you had that one. So here you get that tool here. And that's kind of a punishment upon me from some of the humanoids. They said, yeah, you wanted to go that way, so now you can do what you came here to do, but just with insectoids and bugs and low-level creeps we don't want, right? So, but kindness still plays in no matter what level of creatures that we are looking upon. That's one of the proud features of the true humanoid races. And you will hear say, pride, that is one of the wrong things that you can do. And that's one of the 7 sins, pride. Yes, if you are using pride as a selfish feature to self-justify your wrongful doings, yes, then pride is a trap. But you can be proud of something you do because you know in your heart that this is the right thing to do, because it has for the highest good of the many. And clearing out all of these lost souls and creatures and beings that want to return is for the highest good of the many. Yes, they could go into evaporation and I could say, I don't care, but I do care, because in them I see what they once were. I recognize them. So this is part of the forgiveness. You recognize what we were originally. You see our true potentials and what we originally were, and you see it in the light of grace, as it's called. You see it in the highest potential of their existence. And through that recognition, and through that heartfelt forgiveness, as in, I recognize you. I see you. I know what you were. I know what you chose. I know what you have become. And I know you regret. And I know you want to be released. And for that, I can forgive you. And for that, I give you of my grace. And for that, I will let you go through the gate systems. So that's an act of kindness as well. For those who are not releases, for those of you who are awakening and out there and are trying to go back into your original capacity of who and what you are, and you will encounter all of the ones you have met earlier on the path to who and what you have become today. You will also have to make the distinction between, is this someone you turn the other cheek and turn away and walk away and disconnect, because there is nothing more there. That's a learning lesson in itself. And there you must forgive yourself, not self-justifying, but truly understanding why it's necessary and what can be done and can't be done. That's part of the compassion as well. And with the suffering, it is very hurtful and it's very painful to let go of someone you know of, but you can see that the percentage of light is so small that the chances of turning around or elevation are so slim, and they are now so lodged into the path they have chosen. And they have not gotten there because of manipulation or because they're victims. They have gotten there because they have chosen to do so. And in your kindness, you recognize that choice is theirs, were their choices to make. They have had all the chances along the path to do it differently. And yet they still let their distorted genetics lead them to where they are. And because of that, they are too weak to do otherwise. They have found their strength in the complete polarity. So let them remain there for as long as they need. And eventually, the true laws of all cycles will get the better of them. There is a higher judgment that we don't have to embark on. That's not the judgment of God. But it is put into that saying that all of us that are working under the divine forces, to put it that way, the original creational forces, however we interpret it, whether we personify it as a God or we just see it as the dynamics of the realities that we are part of, we know that in the end, there is a larger judgment going on that we have no personal say in. That's the law of the cycles. And that will take care of these failed projects eventually. They can sustain themselves for quite some time, which they're doing, which is of course unfortunate. And that's one of the consequences of letting them go. You have to, for some that are working on that branch, which I've also done, the discernment always have to be, is there a possibility of redemption? If so, then the work must be done. And then the clearing work must be engaged on. And then we must do everything we can. Because if there is a choice of redemption, it's still for the highest good of the many to get as many people back to where the original houses of creation, right? We can't just leave someone who has the potential for it behind. But if the potentials are gone, then there's nothing more we can do. We must let them go and become what they have become. And that is also an act of kindness. Because technically, if we are constantly imposing our light on dark beings, they will hurt by it. Then we are no longer harmless. And then we will technically take a life, which in a way for those who are not working with energy seems a little bit odd. So that is also important to understand. But for all of us that are working inside this reality field with normal people and humans, I'm just putting things, because what I'm talking about here is, again, discussions I've had with students over the years that are looking at this from the human perspective and therefore completely don't understand it. But you have to have encountered all of these remnants of what is in our reality fields and the other races and the higher races and the true races and the humanoid races and what have you, and remember all of these things to truly put things in context. Not until you know everything you are you in any position to fulfill or put any judgment upon others, to put it that way, which is also part of the commandment. So I'm just working within the same scope of ideas. And the understanding of truly treat another being as you want to be treated in a respectful manner of kindness and inclusivity and understanding goes with that level of truly seeing what they are. Not what you want them to be, not what you want to impose on them, not what you can bear because your heart is breaking. And I had my lessons in this life, repeating that. That's why I recall. It's not just because, oh yeah, in past lives, what have you. No, this is from this life. The encounters I've had in this life, the people I have loved in this life, the people I have been connected to in this life, the choices I've had to make in this life. From what I knew they were and saw, and the fight I was doing to try and assist and help and amplify and lift up and do whatever I could, because I thought I saw potentials, just to understand that that was false light and that was trickery and manipulation, and my perception field was distorted by grace to engage me on that level of work. So that's also part of the picture when we go up at the highest end of the scale of what our system has become. So for those of you saying, well, there is a higher order to everything, there definitely is. But inside this reality field, it has become quite muddy and distorted and difficult. And the original laws do not really apply anymore. The only one that carries the original laws are us when we activate them in our heart. And then the what we need to do with that ability is to navigate in reality with that understanding of kindness and compassion and how it's utilized correctly. And what true kindness is, it is just as kind to look at a dark one and let him go because that is what he has become, so he can be who he is and no longer have a polarity that pushes to him and makes him more and more aggressive, but just let him go. Even though it would be possible for me to activate him on that level, because I've done that as well. But what happens there is just the complete death. That is moth. So that is also where I'm not taking a life, right? So that's also why when we talk about if a dark one wants to go, then it has to be done in consent. And then we work together to make it happen, because there's a realization and there is a meetup, whatever screwed up it might be, because they are completely inverted. So that's sometimes I saw it as an attack. Eventually I learned that's the only way they can do it to get into my field. They have to impose themselves on it and whatever they had to do using grace and all sorts of weird technologies. But in the end, it was for the goal of being released. And it takes a little bit of time to get to that understanding, but that's also part of the compassion and the understanding, because what is compassion? It is feeling with. So that is the deepest level of understanding of another living life form, or whatever that is, because you also have dead life forms, which you will learn to see eventually. There are dead life forms out there that are not alive because they don't have an energy system, but they have a body and they are walking and talking, but they are not really alive. They are dead because they are just energy and form. They no longer hold the life force. So long discussion short in this, and this is just me again putting some of the levels so you understand where not to go and why not to go. There are levels that you will see, but you must recognize in yourself, are you one of the lineages that are supposed to work with this level of reality? Yes or no? If yes, then you must begin the schooling that will lead you to that. That's part of your talent, and that is part of how you work with reality. If you fight it and do not recognize that that is your original purpose, you will create distortion, because then you're not living in concordance with your word, your creational word. You will then create distortion because you are trying to avoid what is truly yours to work with. And that will get you into trouble. And that is transgression as well. And that will create distortion. And that will diminish your life force, because you're not fulfilling your purpose. You're not following the original laws of your creation or your engineering and what you're supposed to do. If you embark on a task that is not yours to take, no matter how well meant it is, you will also create distortion, because you are not in alignment with your word and your true purpose and your true engineering. You are doing something that is not yours to do, but someone else's to do. And you can't take a job from somewhere else. That is not yours to take, because that is to take a consciousness potential from someone else and try to be that function inside this world, which will also lead to distortion. It is against the original laws of harmony and what you were engineered to do to create more life force and more light. So we have to be in complete alignment with who and what we are if we truly are to unfold our life potentials. We cannot take roles that are not ours to take, and that will be part of the resetting as well, as we come to terms with who and what we actually are. And people when that happens, they will naturally look at things that no longer will be in alignment with who and what they truly are, and they will have to walk away from it. They will have to let it go, and we can do it in a nice, caring way for if it's people that we care about, if it's a job situation or whatever it is, we can do it in all good ways and forms. And that's part of the higher awareness lifestyle as well, where we'll learn to, as we awaken and unfold more of our original potentials, we are forced into lines of work and lines of relationships and lines of experiences in this reality that must be in concordance and alignment with our true potentials. And everything else will then become false and create distortion. And that is also painful, because now it's not a matter of, my boyfriend or girlfriend is one of the evilest people on the planet. Then it is this kind, caring, loving person that I have loved for so long are now no longer part of my path. and has come in discord with me. And I'm actually hurting that person because I have chosen to become what I am, but he or she are still what they are, and they have not chosen to go on the path. And that's why when we talk about the Buddhist teachings, where the ones that goes into the middle path, they must leave their home. They must go on their own. And the Hindus did the same thing. Once they were done with the family, the males would, in their late 40s, early 50s, or earlier than that, all depending on how healthy they were, would leave behind their family and join the ashrams, because they would then prepare for the next life and the work that is demanded for the next life, which is to go to the middle domain before you reincarnate again to get the best features of the next life, just to put that in context as well. So that's part of the difficulty, and that's part of what will also unfold your potentials in this life, the suffering that comes with the letting go, once you realize that what you are is not what you were 10 years ago. And personally, I see that that's some of the difficulties that we're going to have in the future, unless that is, of course, being completely shut down and covered up, or whatever term you want to use or words you want to use for that one, by the incoming races that will completely try and avoid that situation and override humans and take away their energy systems and replace them in the blend, or come in with clones, or whatever they will try to do to avoid that to happen. So in that manner, we are also up against saying, well, we have this life where we still have the residual energies of the original dynamics. As long as the new grand cycle are there within the next 20 to 30 years, we still have the original energies that will support us in our activation and clearing work. But we don't know in the next life, because then that is gone, and we don't know what will come. So for me, as in being an honorable being and following the laws of the reality field that I am part of, and being honorable means integrity. So that's a whole other discussion. And what is integrity? Integrity is to be in alignment with your word and your true purpose and function. And by that, are doing what you're supposed to do. And what you know you're not supposed to do, as me being a releaser, is technically not part of my original functionality. But it is the reversed representation inside this reality field. And I know it's only for a time being. And then I will develop a higher level of my energy system where that functionality no longer will be possible. And then it will cease to exist, as the natural laws are of everything. When they lose their function and purpose, they will begin to cease to exist. They will go into extinction. They will extinguish their potentials and their patterns, because they have been worked through and thereby cleared out and thereby no longer exist. I think that will suffice for today, but definitely it has initiated another process. I will not make a fifth video on this one, even though I could. I will just leave these understandings here, that we have the original ways and forms. We had the timeline event, and then we have all the work that we need to do to get back to that point before the timeline event, which is where we can truly begin to recognize who and what we truly are. And since the timeline event itself has retracted to its singularity event and is now just a point somewhere in deep space, and thereby no longer emit any of its energies, we are technically in the position of being able to do so. Also, if we follow the dynamics of the pulse that we get from within, whatever that means. And that's a whole other level of the choices that will become complicated, because then we begin on the journey of the choice making that is not just a respect for life or compassion and the true understanding of what life is, and seeing life in others and whether or not we should work with them, and forgiveness and what forgiveness was actually about. But there it goes into using our talents and our true potentials, and that goes in with the whole do not steal, do not take, do not anything, that goes with energy and how we're utilizing energy in choices and what true choices really mean. And that's the mastery of choices, and that's a whole other series I will embark on. So you see, all of these ethical and moral things that are covered up in wisdom literature or in religion has origin in some foundational rules that are governing the original universal cycles. And I will leave the process open, and we will continue, because we have begun a journey here of recalling, remembering who and what we truly are, and understanding some of the really energetic dynamics behind many of the words that have been utilized and misused within religion and spiritual teaching systems. Thank you.